on Friday, as you know, we launched a bunch of missiles in Syria. We still have a number of troops on the ground there. The question is why? What is this about? Well, the story is that the Assad government used chemical weapons against its civilians. And it's possible that that happened, but it does seem odd. Assad's forces were on the brink of victory, and a chemical weapons attack only hurt his position internationally, so why would he do that? Senator Rand Paul recently made the same observation. Watch.
I think this is a real question, and I think that Assad is either the dumbest dictator on the planet Earth or he didn't do it. Because you think about it, they've been winning the war for over a year. The only thing that galvanizes world opposition to the Assad regime, the only thing that gets us involved at all is the use of chemical weapons.
So what do we really know about this? What questions should we be asking? What questions should we be allowed to ask without being attacked as foreign agents? Peter Ford is the former British ambassador to Syria. He works for a group that has been described as pro-Assad, though he can describe it himself, and he joins us now. Mr. Ambassador, thank you for coming on. So tell us...
Thanks for having me.
Since you do know a lot about Syria, and you're a fluent Arabic speaker, and you follow this carefully, what do we know? What does your government know? What does our government know about the genesis of this chemical attack?
It's not certain by any means that it was a chemical attack. There are reports from Western journalists who were in Duma yesterday, reports that they could find no folks who would confirm that there'd been a chemical attack. They went actually to the hospital where those videos were filmed. They spoke to doctors, named doctors, so this can be checked, who said that there was no chemical attack. What there was an ordinary bomb attack that had people streaming into the hospital with smoke inhalation problems. And what happened then was that the white helmets, that's the jihadi medical auxiliaries,
yes,
started shouting gas, caused panic. Then everybody went into gas mode. They started with the hoses and the inhalers. Meanwhile, it was all being carefully videoed and put out by rich Arab country propagandists. And there's a distinct possibility that we have been deluded, that we've been suckered. I think the president's advisors have served him extremely badly. They've not been asking the hard questions like, who are these white helmets? Was the president told that these are the people who have helped in beheadings, who have literally been picking up the pieces? Are these the people that he thinks would be good witnesses? Did they tell?
So let me stop you and say, I'm at a bit of a disadvantage. I'm not an Arabic speaker. I don't really know what happened. I have no idea. Here's what I do know, though, as an observer of government, is that before you launch any kind of attack, you need to explain to your population why you're doing it, and your explanation has to hold water, because this is a democracy, after all. What do you think, but neither government, no government involved bothered to do that, so what do you think, if you could quickly sum it up, the point of this is? What's the actual point of this?
I don't think it has any real point. The action was futile. Even those sites that were bombed had been inspected as recently as last November by these international inspectors who are there now. Did the president's advisors tell him that they'd been inspected recently and given the all clear? I suspect the president has not been given the facts, and that he's been led into error by advisors who've been extremely gullible and haven't carried out their intelligence work properly. This has all the hallmarks of an intelligence fiasco.
Yes, it does. And those don't tend to go away. They linger. When you mislead the public, they don't forget it. Ambassador, thank you for the perspective on that. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
So the question we want to ask right now is, where do we go from here? Here to weigh in, our panel, Waleed Phares, Fox News national security and foreign affairs analyst, and former political director for George W. Bush, Matt Schlapp, and Keenan Rahmani, with Americans for a Free Syria. He's a policy advisor there. Gentlemen, all, thank you for joining us this morning. Waleed, let me start with you. The mission accomplished with these strikes was meant to send a signal to Assad and his the folks that support him in Russia and Iran. But how do they further any sort of resolution in that region going forward?
Well, number one, mission accomplished means that the tactical mission, though it was a very large tactical mission, was successful. Whatever was the objective, the tactical objective was achieved. Now, beyond that, we'll have to wait to see the reaction. Will the Syrian regime understand and stop using chemical weapons? Will the Iranians and the Russians stop supplying whatever they're supplying to the Assad regime? Is the next stage. Thirdly, we need to be on the initiative. It's not just waiting for Assad to decide when he's going to use these chemical weapons or not. So in my view, and I've made it public many times ago, eastern Syria is where the football game is going to be. We have 2,000 troops there.
Yep.
The Russians are not present there. And it's very important to be able to connect with a border that is secure for us, which is the Jordanian border. So my call would be close that gap on the Iranian link between Iran, Iraq, and Syria.
Matt, the president ran on an America First foreign policy, doesn't want to fight stupid wars in the Middle East as he has used. So he's hit this strike, this tactical mission accomplished. But what do you see as the administration's goals after this?
Yeah, it's a great question, Pete, because this is kind of like the swirl of everyone. This is where we have Iran, we have Russia, we have Sunni, we have Shia, we have the destruction of ISIS, and the president has this terrible thing that he's inherited, which is how does he make sense of this region? And I'll be honest with you, Pete, as you read and study and talk to people, it's hard to determine the right path forward. And when the military outcomes are not clear, it is wiser to pull away. I think the president did the right thing in trying to strike chemical munitions and stockpiles, but that's a tricky game as well. And I think that he needs to make his point on the use of weapons of mass destruction. But I do not think it would be wise with these facts on the ground for the United States to get pulled into this very strange compilation of forces in Syria.
Keenan, a strange compilation of forces indeed. Obviously, the president has empathy for these innocents being gassed by a dictator, but he also has limits on what he wants America to be doing there. As someone who's intimately knowledgeable about what's happening on the ground in Syria, what is your expectation of the future?
I mean, absolutely no one wants a never-ending conflict in Syria and a never-ending U.S. presence in Syria, but the president said he was going to put a cost for the Assad regime, for Russia and Iran, for their use of chemical weapons and for their slaughter of innocents. And it doesn't look like this was that cost. It looks like Secretary Mattis has undermined the president's agenda against Iran. And we saw that with the Iran deal, and we're seeing that now, that the president is unable to have a real cost on Iran. Why do we have 80,000 Iranian militias in Syria? These are threatening the United States, they're threatening our allies. And just today, the Assad regime launched new airstrikes in Homs and Hama on innocent civilians. So the Assad regime feels that, at best, this is an invitation to use any weapon other than chemical weapons. And I think, at worst, we have not sent any message that's stronger than what we did last year. And the Assad regime will continue using chemical weapons next year.
Well, we'll see. Obviously, the administration has said they won't allow that to happen. Well, Waleed, answer that question, though. Will Iran read this message and, as a result, recalibrate their pursuit of nuclear weapons? I mean, does this have that ancillary effect of sending a signal that when we say you can't have nukes, you really can't have them?
It's a different game, my friend, in Iran. Iran is a much larger country. It actually has a much larger military. And actually, Iran is now deploying in Iraq, in Syria, in Lebanon, in Yemen, trying to penetrate Saudi Arabia. So for the next round, I don't know when would that be. If we want to confront them, the price will be higher. And as a matter of fact, in terms of choices for Syria, fine. If we don't want to go against the regime, that's a good choice. But if we actually allow Iran to stay in Syria, next crisis will be on the Jordanian borders. They will be on the Saudi borders. So it is not something we can escape forever.
Matt Schlapp, where do they make that balance? You hear, Saudi borders, Jordanian borders, Syrian borders, yet most Americans are worried about our southern border. Where does this administration lay the focus to put America first? Is it on Iran? Is it on sending signals to North Korea? Where's the biggest priority?
Look, our enemies overseas are Iran in the Middle East and China globally, including with all this IP theft and everything else. And I think the president has to stay focused like a laser on who the true enemies are. A nuclearized Iran is unacceptable. He's made that clear. And he now has the advisors he wants around him, like Ambassador John Bolton, to be able to decertify the Iran nuclear deal. So I think that's the next step with Iran. But I think you're right, Pete. It is about what is in the American interest, and it is not in the American interest for us to be pulled into wars all over the world, especially between radicalized Shia and Sunni. Some of these battles are not battles that American troops should be in the middle of.
Keenan, we only have a moment. Brief answer, please. Do you see Assad using chemical weapons again?
I think he's going to think about it, and I think when it comes to the American interest is to stop the Assad regime, to get a political transition there, so that the Assad regime, which is harboring ISIS and harboring extremist Iranian militias, can be brought to justice and can be stopped from committing these atrocities against civilians.
We shall see. Three smart guys, Waleed, Matt, Keenan, thank you for your